Welcome back to Living in the Word, and today we are looking at Jacob, Leah, and Rachel. So let's begin. Genesis 29, verses 1 to 8. So Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east, and he looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. And Jacob said to them, My brethren, where are you from? And they said, We are from Haran. Then he said to them, Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. So he said to them, Is he well? And they said, He is well, and look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. Then he said, Look, it is still high day. It is not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go and feed them. But they said, We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together, and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep. So here Jacob meets some shepherds who are from Haran. They know Laban, and they obviously know Rachel. Genesis 29 verses 9 to 12. Now, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative, and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father. Now, Rachel is a shepherdess, which was quite an unusual occupation for a woman, which is why Moses explains that she is a shepherdess. Now, Jacob waters the flocks of Laban, just as Rebekah had done to Abraham's servant. Quite an interesting parallel there. Genesis 29 verses 13 to 20. Then it came to pass, when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him and kissed him, and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. So after staying with Laban for a month, Laban offers to start paying Jacob. Now Laban has 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel. Leah is the older, and the Bible says that she has delicate eyes. Now the Hebrew word used here is raka. Now when talking about the body, it means tender or delicate. It only means soft or gentle when referring to words spoken. Now, some people believe it means weak, but it means more weak of heart or timid than weak eyes. So contrary to most people's understanding, this may be telling us that Leah had delicate or tender eyes, meaning lovely, whereas Rachel was just beautiful all round. Now, Jacob offers to work for Laban for 7 years for Rachel's hand in marriage. And obviously this seems like a fairly good deal for Laban to pretty much jump at it. Genesis 29 verses 21 to 30. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her." And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. Now it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. And Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me?" And Laban said, "It must not be done so in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years." Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. So he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also. And Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Then Jacob also went into Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Laban still another 7 years. Now, Laban tricks Jacob into marrying Leah, giving an excuse that the younger cannot marry before the elder. So after the 7-day celebration, Jacob marries Rachel as well and works another 7 years for Laban. One thing I want to point out in relation to Laban's character is that he could have told Jacob about his youngest daughter not being able to marry before the oldest. Why did he not tell Jacob this when Jacob asked to marry Rachel in the first place? Did he just forget, or was there a more sinister plan on Laban's part? Earlier in verse 19, Laban doesn't hesitate at Jacob's offer, perhaps a sign that Laban thought he was getting a good deal. 14 years of free labor will be great in anyone's eyes. Or perhaps this is a lesson from God in you reap what you sow. Jacob had deceived Isaac and was now on the receiving end of the deception. Genesis 29, verses 31 to 35. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me." Then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, "Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also." And she called his name Simeon. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, "Now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was called Levi." And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, "Now I will praise the Lord." Therefore she called his name Judah. Then she stopped bearing. Here the Bible refers to Leah as unloved. Jacob loved Rachel. That there was no secret in that Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. In the end, he had to work 14 years for Rachel's hand in marriage. He didn't hate Leah, but he did love Leah less than Rachel. Leah then has 4 sons to Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. We'll continue on Genesis 30, verses 1 to 13. Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I die." And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" So she said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go into her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that I also may have children by her. Then she gave him Bilhah her maid as wife, and Jacob went into her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan. And Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, with great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. So she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah her maid and gave her to Jacob as wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, a troop comes. So she called his name Gad. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. So she called his name Asher. Rachel makes the same mistake that Sarah made by giving her maidservant to her husband. And I will add that Jacob makes the same mistake as Abraham by accepting this proposal. Bilhah has two sons, Dan and Naphtali. Then Leah gives her maidservant Zilpah to Jacob, and she has two sons, Gad and Asher. Now, at this stage, we can see a lot of jealousy from the two wives and problems arising from this jealousy, which is why God does not condone having two wives. Genesis 30 verses 14 to 24. Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, God has given me my wages, because I have given my maid to my husband. So she called his name Issachar. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will dwell with me, because I have borne him six sons. So she called his name Zebulun. Afterwards she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. Now Reuben had collected some mandrakes for his mother Leah. Now mandrakes were believed in the ancient Near East to have magical fertility powers. This is why both Leah and Rachel argued over the mandrakes. Leah then has another two sons, Issachar and Zebulun, and a daughter Dinah. Then Rachel has a son and names him Joseph, and we'll read about him later on. Well, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video. God bless.